My guest today is Nancy Harhut. She's named in the top 10 most fascinating people in B2B marketing. She speaks all over the world and she just released her new book, Using Behavioral Science in Marketing. Drive customer action and loyalty by prompting instinctive responses. So Nancy, welcome, but you just wrote the book for total global domination.
Well, Alex, thank you for having me on the show. And yes, we're going for global domination. That's fabulous. Okay.
So how long have you had these aspirations to take over the world?
Well, I can't say that I've really had aspirations to take over the world for a long time. I haven't even had aspirations to write a book for a long time, honestly. But I would speak at these different conferences and people would come up to me and say, "Oh, I want to buy your book." And first time that happened, thought, oh, that's kind of sweet. I don't have a book though. And then it happened again and then it happened again. And then Kogan Page out of the UK reached out to me and said, I'd like to write a book. And I thought, I think I'm ready to write a book. Let's take on the world.
So you are taking over the world. So one of the things that you help corporations with is to unlock automatic yeses from customers. So the automatic responses, the triggers. So people are defenseless against your strategies, your tactics.
Well, I absolutely do help marketers unlock the automatic yeses. I wouldn't say that people are defenseless, but when you think about it, there's probably three kinds of people that will encounter a marketing message. A company sends out their marketing message, and or an entrepreneur sends out their marketing message, and there are going to be some people who think, awesome, I've been looking for this. This is exactly what I want. Sign me up. I'm going to get it. And then there's going to be another group of people, and that's going to be the group of people that says, no, not for me, not interested. I either have a solution I like, or I have a vendor that I prefer, or, no way am I ever going to be able to invest in that. So they're hard no's. They're not going to happen. And then there's a much larger group of people. And that's the group of people that could potentially do business with you. But first they have to notice that your message is out there. They have to understand it. It must resonate with them. And then they need to remember it, and then they need to act on it. And that's where behavioral science helps. So it's not that people are powerless against it. There's no magic bullet that's going to make someone do something that they absolutely don't want to do. But for so many people who are cruising along on life, through life on autopilot, who are, attention starved, their attention is drawn in all these different directions. For those people, when they encounter a marketing message that's been optimized using behavioral science, they have a much better chance of connecting with that message and doing something that would actually be beneficial to them as well as to the marketer.
So I love behavioral science. One of the people you say thanks to in the book is also Dan Ariely. I've almost all his books. I love his writing. And it's all about finding what drives human motivation, on the subconscious level. So you say you're not defenseless against it, but pretty much, for a large part, we are defenseless if we don't know about our subconscious. So the question is, behavioral science. Could you explain a little bit what behavioral science is and how it will benefit?
Absolutely. So behavioral science is the study of how people behave, or more specifically, how people make decisions. And what behavioral scientists have found is people don't always make the most well thought out, well considered decisions. The companies who are marketing to them think that they do or hope that they do, but that's not often the case. Sometimes it is, but very often it's not. Very often what happens is people cruise along on autopilot and they use decision defaults. It's a way to conserve mental energy, because if people had to weigh every bit of information before making a decision, they'd never making any. So instead, they develop these automatic, instinctive, reflexive behaviors. And when they encounter a situation, they just default to these hardwired behaviors, giving them little, if any, thought. And behavioral scientists have identified hundreds of these automatic behaviors, and some of them influence what we read, who we trust, when we buy. And that's why they're so important to marketers. That's why marketers should be interested in them, and that's why marketers should use them.
So aren't you scared when you read all these scientific reports? Like, whoa, am I doing this?
So I think I do believe that you can't really force someone to do something that they don't want to do, but you can increase the likelihood that they do something that both you and they want to do or want them to do. So if somebody really doesn't want to get involved with your product or service, there's no magic wand that will make them. But for the people who might find it beneficial, there are a lot of things you can do to make it more likely that they will engage and that they will respond. And that's what I like to focus on.
So in the book, you talk a lot about the shortcuts in the brain. You have a long list. And what I love about your book, it's very practical. We all know The Science of Influence by Cialdini. And he also gives a little bit of practical data, but you also have a background in marketing. So you actually use it in B2B marketing. So you know the results.
You're absolutely right. I'm not a academic or a researcher. I'm an actual marketing practitioner. I work in advertising marketing. I have for my entire career. Now I have a small agency called HBT Marketing, and we focus on actually adding behavioral science to marketing best practices. So when I sat down to write the book, I wrote it so that it was very short on science. You know, the title is Behavioral Science and Marketing, and people think, "Ooh, science, lab coats, test tubes, what's going on?" But it's very short on science. Not a lot of science, just enough science so that you go, "Oh, now I understand how that works." And there's much more about how to apply it in marketing. Very practical, actionable techniques, mistakes to avoid. You know, different ways that you can apply a particular technique, checklists, key takeaways, case studies with examples. So anyone who's looking to use this will find it very easy. It's very actionable. It's easy to get through. It's easy to read. You can dive in and out of it. You don't have to read one chapter after another. You can, parachute into a particular chapter if it's of interest to you. If there's a particular marketing problem that you're trying to solve, and there's a chapter that that is especially relevant, you can go right into that. So it's an easy to use kind of hands-on handbook for marketers, and it really is very practical. I've been doing this for a number of years. And so I've had the opportunity to gather a lot of data, to do a lot of testing, to see what works and to also see what doesn't work.
So it's very, you begin the book with tap into the emotion, also in B2B companies. And I think that's very significant what you say, because we keep thinking it's rational behavior. But what are your views on this? And also you say even highly intelligent people.
Yes, it's true. A lot of times marketers like to think that people are very deliberate in their decision making, and they weigh the pros and cons, and they do the cost benefit analysis, and they depend on the facts and the figures and the speeds and the feeds, and they make very data driven decisions. And while that does sometimes happen, very often it doesn't. There's a lot of research that shows that humans actually make decisions for emotional reasons, and then they later justify those decisions to themselves and to other people with rational reasons. But that initial decision, whether it's in a B2C environment or a B2B environment, that initial decision is driven by emotion. There was a researcher named Antonio Damasio, and he studied people who had sustained injury to the parts of their brain that controlled emotion. And what he found was they were virtually incapable of making a decision, even a decision as simple as, "What would you like for lunch today?" They would go around and around and around. They couldn't land, because humans need to access that emotional part of their brains. We did some work for a business intelligence software company. And so the idea of their product was they would take data from different silos, and they would bubble it up so that people could get a 360-degree view of it. So if you think about it, that's a pretty important thing. And there are a number of different ways they could have approached this. They could have rolled out marketing that explained exactly what they did. You have a problem. Your data is siloed. As a result, you can't see all of it, and so you're making decisions with less than optimum information. We have the solution for that. So they could have done that. Or they could have taken it a step further and said, here's the situation. You don't have all the data you need to make decisions, so that you're making decisions that are probably going to be wrong. At some point, you're going to make the wrong decision because you didn't have the right information, and that's going to be costly, But they ended up testing and rolling out a third approach, which was very emotionally driven. They talked about what it must feel like for the person who's making these decisions, knowing that they don't have all the data, what it must feel like for them. And, if you're a high-level executive, or if you're running your own company and you're making decisions, and you know that there's some information out there that you can't put your hands on, that's a problem. You second guess yourself. You have sleepless nights. You have agita. You can't eat. You can't. And so we ran with that thinking, that emotion. And so we had headlines that said the delete button for that voice in your head, or the antacid for a diet of tough decisions. We really focused on the emotion. That's how we led in. And then, of course, we talked about the problem, the product rather, and what it did and how it would help. But we led with that emotion. And we went in with a number of different campaigns and we tested them. And this was the one that ended up rolling out because it showed a 11% increase in brand favorability and a 13% increase in likelihood to purchase. So people really do make their decisions emotionally, even in a B2B environment where we think people are, much more rational, or even in some highly complex verticals. Still, emotion is driving action.
So twisting the knife. So and also the second option was the loss aversion, but I agree, the emotional response, even in when you say it, I feel it, and I'm not even the target.
Despair,
well, that's just it. Desperation.
And I think when a brand, a company, a product can show their target that they understand that target's world, that builds trust. And the target thinks, if they really understand me that well, then they must have a product that will be helpful for me. And I think that's one of the key benefits of leading with emotion.
So you have a couple of strategies also. Let's maybe we can talk about some of them, because they're not usually talked about. The autonomy bias.
Yes. Autonomy bias is very interesting. What behavioral scientists have found is humans have this deep-seated desire to exert some kind of control over themselves, over their environments. Behavioral scientists talk about it as agency, but they want, some kind of control, some kind of agency over decisions. They don't like to be forced to do certain things. And one of the things that makes people feel like they have control is to give them a choice. So if you give somebody a choice, they get to make a selection. They feel like they're in control. And so there are a couple of interesting studies that came out of this. One is there's something called the BYAF technique, and BYAF stands for but you are free. So you can ask someone to do something, you explain why you think it's good for them to do it, then you say, please do it, and then you follow up with, but you are free to choose, BYAF, but you are free to choose, or words to that effect, but it's up to you, but it's your choice. And what researchers found is when you remind people, using the BYAF technique, when you remind people that the choice is theirs, you get a 50% increase in the likelihood of people doing what you want them to do. Another piece of research came out of Tulane University, and what they found is if you have more than one option for someone, people are more likely to make a buying decision in the moment. If you put one option in front of someone, their decision-making goes like this, do I or do I not want it? And there's nothing to compare it to. There's no context. And so very often what they do is they think, I'm going to think about it. I'm going to do my own research. I'll maybe talk to some people. And then life intervenes and they don't get around to it. But if you put two or maybe three things down in front of somebody, then the question isn't, do I or do I not want this? The question becomes, which of these do I want? It's like a foregone conclusion. You're going to take one of them. The question is, which one? So those are two ways where we can leverage autonomy bias. My only caution is when I talk about choice, you don't want to run into a situation where you give people too many choices, because then overload sets in. People aren't sure which decision to make. Analysis paralysis. They finally maybe choose something and then they second guess themselves. So you're better with 2, 3, maybe 4 choices. Wouldn't go much beyond that. But giving someone choice triggers that feeling that they're autonomous, and that's a very good thing. So it's a very deep-seated human desire.
And the autonomy bias, I mentioned this one first because you use it on me during our email exchange. And I saw it because I use it all the time.
Yeah, it's a very good technique. I years ago, I worked for an agency, and my creative director's name was Frank Parrish. And he was trying to convince businesses to choose AT&T for their long distance service. And up until then, they had no choice. They had to have AT&T. And now, regulations had changed, and now they had a choice. And so, of course, AT&T wanted to make sure that they hung on to as many as possible. So we would be sending out all of these, messages telling people to make the decision to stay with AT&T. And we had a certain amount of success, but we had one last opportunity. And I remember Frank saying to me, he was thinking about it. And one day he came into the agency and he said, I've got it. I know what I'm going to do. And it was a letter at this point. He opened the letter by saying, you have a decision to make. And if you don't make it soon, somebody else will make it for you. And they got a 38.4% response rate. And at the time, he didn't talk to me about autonomy bias. I'm not even sure he was familiar with the term at that point, but he talked to me about the fact that you've got all of these business people, and what would you really hate as a business owner. You would hate to have someone forcing you to do something, someone making a decision that rightfully you should. And I thought that was a wonderful example of autonomy bias.
And the strange thing about this, it even works when it's blatantly obvious. I've seen it played out. I don't know why this is, but also colleagues, I saw it with a colleague of mine, and he told the other colleague, but of course it's totally your choice. And it still worked. So it's very a deep desire.
It's fun. Sometimes, we're aware of these tactics and these techniques. We understand how they work, and we still succumb to them, or we're still influenced by them. I just wrote a book about them. I studied them. I'm really interested in them. And I can think of opportunity or times in my life where, it's happened to me. And I think back later and I go, oh, now I know why I did that. But in the moment, we're cruising along on autopilot. We're not really thinking. We're not completely engaged. We're just responding. And these are hardwired responses.
Yeah. But even if I see it, I love it. So it's a great one. I have another one, but I can't pronounce it. Zeigarnik effect.
The Zeigarnik effect. Yes.
Almost.
This was named after a Russian sociologist, I think. Her name was Bluma Zeigarnik. And what she found was humans have this desire to finish what we started. We have this desire to finish what we started. So if we start something and then we don't finish it, it kind of nags at us. It kind of bugs us. It's why cliffhangers in the media do so well. We're maybe watching a television program and it goes on summer hiatus, and we can't wait for the next episodes to come out. We can't wait to find out what happens next. How is it going to end? And what we can do as marketers to use it is we can remind people that they've started something and that they need to come back and finish it. So a great way to do that is, if you've ever seen those loyalty programs where you get a punch card. It could be online, it could be offline, but here's 10 blank boxes. You get a check mark in each box when you make a purchase. And after you've made 10 purchases, you'll get the 11th thing for free. Maybe it's a cup of coffee, maybe it's a car wash, whatever. So you can give somebody a card with 10 blank boxes, or you can give them a card with 11 boxes with the first box pre-checked. So in both cases, there's still 10 blank boxes. There's either 10 blank boxes or there's 11 boxes. 10 of them are blank. The first one is pre-checked. What researchers have found is when that first box is pre-checked, people are more likely to take the action to get all the other boxes checked. It's because it started, they want to finish it. And it's something like I think an 80% likelihood that they will get the rest of those boxes checked when you start out with the first one pre-checked. So 80%. It's really interesting. It's not exactly 80%. I don't have the number right in front of me, but it was a very high percentage, 70, 80%, something like that. I went to a website and I designed a business card, but I didn't buy it. I kind of designed it. I was playing around with it. And then I got distracted. Something came up and I walked away and that was it. And so they sent me a picture of the card that I was designing at the exactly where I had left off on it. And they said, hey, come back and finish your card. You left something here, come back. So I think that's it's a great way to just remind people, showing them a picture or sending them a message saying, hey, you were still, you were here. We still have that item you were looking at, that thing that you were interested in. Don't you still need it? Don't, remember to come on back. And sometimes it's just that little nudge that we need. And then we're like, right, that's right. I have to do that. And then, it stays with us until we actually complete it and can cross it off the list or check it off our list.
Yeah, it's I don't know why it is. It's something like a gathering effect. We need to complete stuff. So I like this one very much. The next one, we have the endowment effect.
Yeah, the endowment effect is really interesting. It was coined by Richard Thaler. The term was coined by Richard Thaler, who recently won the Nobel Prize just a few years ago. And what he found was, if there's something that we want to get, well, obviously we value it. That's why we want to get it. But once it's ours, once something is owned by us or possessed by us, we place even greater value on it. It's why, if you're going to sell your house, maybe you call up a real estate agent, you say, I'm going to sell my house. The real estate agent says, okay, I'll call you back in a little while. I'm going to do some research and I'm going to find out what a house like yours, your square footage, in your location, in the condition that it's in, what we should sell it for. They do the research, they come back and based on the data, they say, okay, Nancy, you should put your house on the market for this amount of money. And what's Nancy going to say? I'm going to say, that's all? No, it should be more. Why? Because the house is mine, so I overvalue it. So there was a great example that I write about in the book. a wine company, an online wine company, wanted me to buy a bottle of wine by 11:59 tomorrow. And so they could have said, buy a bottle by 11:59 tomorrow, we're going to give you $15. Or buy a bottle by 11:59 tomorrow, we'll take $15 off. Or buy a bottle by 11:59 tomorrow, we've got a sale going on and everyone's saving $15. But instead they said, you, Nancy, have a $15 credit in your account that expires by 11:59 tomorrow. And that subtle difference was very meaningful because the $15 credit was already in my account. It was mine. And if I didn't spend it, I was going to lose it. And that's very different than saying, you buy something and I'll give you $15 off. They were saying, you already have the $15, but if you don't spend it, you're going to lose it. I thought that was a fabulous example of the endowment effect.
That's a great one. I'm going to use that one. That's so mean.
Yeah, no. Well, it was very, very powerful.
Yeah,
it's
of course.
Sometimes just the words you choose or the way you frame something can make a huge difference.
Yeah, that's also what you talk about in the book, about the wording that you have to use, storytelling. Can you talk a little bit about the stories or the wording, the precise wording that you have to use?
Yes, stories are interesting. Storytelling has become a little bit of a buzzword in marketing, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Stories are really important. When you think about it, stories are how information was passed down from generation to generation before the written word, right? So stories are engaging, they're entertaining, they're involving. People really like stories. People lean into stories, but stories also have an interesting impact on the brain. When we're just dealing with facts and figures, two areas of the brain are affected or activated. Broca's area and Wernicke's area. Those are the two areas that are responsible for processing language. So that's fine. But when we tell a story, when somebody listens to a story, other parts of their brain get activated. If you hear about somebody running down the street or racing into a burning building, that activates the motor cortex in your brain. Or if you read about the aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafting under your door in the morning, that would activate the olfactory cortex in your brain. And the net here is the more parts of your brain that are activated, the better you understand something and the longer you remember it. And when you think about marketers, what do we want? We want people to understand our message and we want them to remember it. So storytelling can be really, really effective in that respect. Researchers have also found that when someone's listening to a story, the storyteller and the story listener end up on the same wavelength. Their brain waves actually synchronize. So you're not just on the same page, you're literally on the same wavelength. Your brain waves synchronize. And stories have been said, or the thing they say about stories is there's really no other way to activate parts of your brain so that the person who's hearing the story feels like they're experiencing it and they feel like it's really their own. Like you can take an idea as a marketer and put it into the brain of your target market and they embrace it as if they're experiencing it as their own. It becomes their idea. And the wonderful thing about your own ideas is you don't argue with them the way you would if someone else is telling you to do something, right? When you come to your own conclusions, when you have your own ideas, well, those are yours and those are the ones you believe. So stories are incredibly, incredibly powerful for marketers.
And also because it's your own experience, the critical thinking goes way down. So you're a lot less critical about the information that's coming in.
Absolutely, absolutely. Your defenses go right down, and that's why when we were talking about word choice, and a lot of times when we're telling a story, we use the word imagine. Imagine, this is going to happen. Imagine this. And when you hear the word imagine, right away, you relax, your defenses go right down because we're not talking about facts. We're not talking about reality. We're talking about imagination, so that opens things up. But then when you ask someone to imagine something, they create a mental picture. And here's what happens. No one will ever do anything unless they can first imagine themselves doing it. Until they can see themselves doing it. If you said to me, Nancy, would you ever jump out of an airplane? I would say, Alex, no, I could never see myself jumping out of an airplane. But that's very telling. It's like, we won't do what we can't see ourselves do, what we can't imagine. And when we tell someone to imagine something, they create a mental picture so they can actually see it. And when they create that mental picture, it's personalized to them. They're the ones creating it. So it's perfect for their situation. And that's another thing that makes it so persuasive.
So let's jump right in with the gap theory, because imagining, you have to see beyond the gap.
Yes. Yeah. So information gap theory is interesting. There's a researcher named George Lowenstein. He's a neuroeconomist, and he did some work in the idea of information gap theory. And what he found was if there's a gap between what you know and what you want to know, you'll take action to close the gap. If there's a gap between something that you know and something that you want to know, you're compelled to find out. You'll take that action. And so that's why, when marketers can use words like who, what, where, when, why, or the most, or the least, or the best, or the worst, that can really activate this idea of an information gap, because we don't know, well, what is the best, or what is the worst, or what is, why is this, or who is this? And so we'll take the action to find out. And researchers have found that getting the information in and of itself feels like a reward, and the brain processes it that way. When we actually obtain the information, it's rewarding, brain chemicals are released, and it feels good. So when marketers can tee up an information gap, particularly using who, what, where, when, why, how, that's a great way to increase engagement and action.
And you also get right into with the open loop again. You want to close that loop, so you create the gap. You have some maybe a practical example of how you use this in the campaign, maybe.
Yeah, we were doing some work for a company that sells insurance to dentists. So there you have two really exciting topics: insurance and dentist, right? So I'm kidding. Obviously, they're not the most exciting topics, but they were going to be at a trade show. And they were going to be at this trade show, and they were going to have a booth at the trade show, and they were going to be surrounded by all these other companies at the trade show that were introducing the latest products and services, the newest advances, the newest equipment, all this, great technology. And here they were sitting there selling insurance. So you can imagine how not very popular their booth was going to be. So they're trying to get out ahead of it. Like, all right, what can we do that will get people to come to our booth? So like, well, all right, we could give away really great stuff. That'll attract people, but it attracts them for the wrong reason. Go to booth 17, they're giving away money. Okay, lots of people will go, but you're not going to get any business out of it. So we thought about it, and the creative team came up with a really interesting solution. They found that if you're a dentist and you need life insurance, the optimum amount is about 5 to 7 years worth of your salary. That's kind of like the rule of thumb, I should say, the average amount. If you have between 5 and 7 years of your salary as amount of life insurance, that's a good thing for you as a dentist. So they rolled out a campaign that was find your 5 to 7. And so people didn't know what exactly it was, find your 5 to 7. And then they said, dentists usually have a higher 5 to 7. And so they intrigued people that way. And people wanted to know, well, what is a 5 to 7? How does it apply to me? Why do dentists, which is my profession, have an even higher one? So they got a lot of booth traffic. People were coming over to the booth. And then there was like a little online quiz that you could take that, basically helped you figure out how much insurance you should have. You got to find your 5 to 7, right? But while you're there taking the quiz, the representatives at the booth could talk to you. You gave them your email address, so they could follow up with you later. So it turned out to be a very successful promotion. So here they were selling life insurance to dentists, but they used information gaps theory to get a lot of people interested because they talked about it in a way that people wanted to find out more.
I never heard this one before. I love it. It's a great one.
Thank you. Yeah, it was pretty successful. Find your 5 to 7.
It's very cool. Now we got into the little bit darker ones. The automatic compliance.
Ah, yes. Automatic compliance. So the word because is what's been known as what's been called an automatic compliance trigger. So what happens is when we see or hear the word because, we just start to agree before we've even processed what comes next. Before we even look at the words or process the words that come after that word, because we're already agreeing. There was a researcher at Harvard, her name is Ellen Langer, and she conducted this photocopier experiment. So they were lined up, she used a photocopier. She sent someone to the head of the line and she instructed them to say, excuse me, can I cut in front of you? And 60% of the time, people said yes. So that was our baseline. She repeated the experiment a second time. And this time she instructed the person to go to the head of the line and say, excuse me, can I cut in front of you? Because I'm in a hurry and I have some copies to make. 60% number climbed to 94%. And as we hear this, we think, well, they said they were in a hurry, right? But Langer repeats the experiment a third and final time. She instructs the person to go to the head of the line and say, excuse me, can I cut in front of you? Because I have some copies to make. So the 94% number dropped to 93%, statistically insignificant. That's still a huge lift over that baseline 60. Now, when you think about it, everybody standing in that line was standing in that line because they had some copies to make, right? You don't stand in line at the photocopier to get a coffee. It doesn't work that way. But what happens, what happens is we just stop listening. Dr. Langer identified the word because as an automatic compliance trigger. When we see it, when we hear it, we just assume whatever's coming next is a legitimate reason, and we start to agree. We just start to agree without even processing what comes next. So it's very, very handy. I always say to my clients, a lot of times you'll talk about your product or service, the features and benefits, where it's available, how much it is. That's not enough. You still need to close the loop and explain to people why they should get it. And it doesn't have to be this incredible reason. It's, get this and you'll earn $1 million, get this and you'll 10x your profitability. That would be great to say if you can, but a lot of times you can't. So you might want to just say, because this will be really helpful, because you're going to find that this is a really great product, because you're going to really enjoy this, but just provide that reason why. And it just makes people more likely to comply.
It's so strange with the copier. It's like without even giving a good reason.
Yes.
It's fascinating what words can do. So you have a lot more. Well, let's talk about a number of these triggers, because you have another one.
So some of them are actually almost counterintuitive, if you will. So one of them is the idea of the reciprocity principle, give to get, and basically what it says, and this is a big principle of Robert Cialdini's. If you do something for someone, if you do a favor for them, if you give them something, even if they didn't ask for it, once they're in possession of it, they now feel obligated to you, and they feel that they'd like to return the favor, and they feel like they owe you until they can even the score. So it's why a lot of companies should embrace this idea of give to get, put out helpful videos, give away free samples, provide information, provide free trials, because once people take advantage of something like that, then when it's time to actually make a purchasing decision, you're the one they're going to return to, because you help them out, right up front. So we were doing some work for a financial services firm, and they had some financial advisors who sold their product, but the financial advisors had stopped selling their product a year or more ago. So it's been over 12 months. They just weren't selling the product. And so they wanted to do a campaign to try to reactivate them. So this might sound counterintuitive, but we said, okay, we're going to send them a gift. And you might say, well, why would you send a gift to the people who aren't doing what you want them to do? Why not save your money and send your gifts to the people who are selling your product, who are selling the funds, reinforce that behavior? But what we did instead is we sent a gift to the people who had stopped selling our products and services. And what we chose was a New Yorker cartoon. And it was a cartoon about some, young salesperson selling retirement services. So it was appropriate. In the caption of the cartoon was the individual recipient's name. So yours would have had Alex in the name, in the caption. Mine would have said Nancy in the caption. So it was a great cartoon. It was personalized. It was framed. We sent that along with a note from the wholesaler saying, hey, we'd love to just get in touch, tell you what's going on, see how you're doing, time to check in. And what they ended up doing was they picked up $68 million in incremental business as a result of that campaign, because people didn't ask for the cartoon. It just arrived. We had sent an email saying, watch your mailbox, it'll be coming soon. And sure enough, it arrived, and there it was. And it was cool. It had your name on it. It was framed. They're going to hang it on their office wall. They're looking at it all the time. So it's top of mind. And then you start to feel like, they said I should give them a call. Maybe I should, and for the people who didn't call on their own, the wholesaler called them. And when the call comes in, you feel funny saying, oh no, I don't want to take the call, because you're looking at the gift they sent you. $68 million in incremental business that they trace back to that one campaign. So pretty powerful stuff.
And don't think you can get away with a cheap gift. It has to be something that's in the office they want to look at.
Yes. Well, I think a lot of the earlier ideas were, a coffee mug, a sleeve of golf balls, the things that are pretty typical. And, this demonstrated that they put a little bit more thought into it. It was a lot, a lot more interesting in terms of a gift. Although, I would imagine that, reciprocity can be triggered even with a small gift. There was a researcher, his name was Philip Kuntz, and he sent Christmas cards to total strangers. He just went through the phone book. He picked out names of people he didn't know at random. He sent them Christmas cards. 20% of those people sent him a card back, even though they had no idea who he was. So that's just the way humans are wired. We're very civil. We like to return favors. We like to answer in kind. We don't like to owe people.
Was that the car salesman with the cards?
No, he was not a card salesman.
Okay.
No, he was a professor.
A car salesman.
Oh, was it a car? No, I don't think so. He was a professor.
So, do you have any tips on how to give value to the free stuff you give? But you talked about the white reports, the videos, but when you send them, the value decreases, and people get them. So, do you have a way to make sure that they know what the value is?
That's an interesting question, Alex, because on the one hand, we know that free is a very powerful word. If you use free or complimentary in a subject line for your email, for example, free will get you twice the number of opens than the word complimentary. I mean, we have this visceral reaction to free. Dan Ariely writes about it in his book. He has an entire chapter in his book, Predictably Irrational, about it. And he said, free produces such an emotional charge in us that we far overvalue the free item. So on the one hand, when we see free, we have to have it. Would you even pay a few cents for that item? No, but if it's free, I have to have it. When, think about going to a conference and you're going up and down the trade show floor and you're just grabbing all of that free stuff. And then it's time to pack and you think, why did I take all of this? Right. So on the one hand, free can be very powerful, but on the other hand, and I think this is where you're going, people think, well, how good can it be if they gave it for free? Right. So there are a couple of different ways around that to still harness the power of free and the emotional charge that it produces, but to not devalue things. So one is to say what the price usually is. It's free, but for right now, it's usually an X dollar value, but for right now it's free, and it's free to you because. So we provide the reason why you are going to get it for free, and it's only for a limited time. And here's what other people pay. Here's what it's valued at. So that's one way to do it. Another thing to do is the free thing that you give away isn't necessarily your product or your service, but it's something ancillary to it. So the free item isn't of much use unless you're also purchasing the product or the service that the company sells. But if you plan to purchase the product or the service, getting that free add-on makes it that much more desirable and will provide that extra incentive for you to make the purchase. So those are a couple of different ways to handle the notion of free.
I love that one. So you do a lot of business with B2B. How do you start? You have a big list of all the tactics, strategies. How do you do that? Maybe give us a little bit of a tip.
I do work with both B2B and B2C, and even some not-for-profit. So we kind of work across the board. But what we do is first, I want to talk to the client. I want to find out what their goal is, what they're trying to achieve. Talk to me about your product. Talk to me about your target market. And then we start to get into some very important information. Why is it that people don't want to do what you're asking them to do? Like you've got a great product, you have a well-defined target market. It should be easy, right? But there's something, not always, but there's often something in the way. And so we want to get at what that something is. Are you not well known? Do people think that there's a better provider? Are they uncertain that your product is going to deliver? Like, what do they think the price might be too high? Like, what is it that we think is the number one buying barrier? And then once we know what that buying barrier is, then we can start to look at the behavioral science principles that we might use to counteract it. So I have 17 chapters in the book. In those 17 chapters, I think I list 25 or more behavioral science principles. They're my go-tos. They're the ones that I use pretty often. I've found that they work. It's not that there aren't more. There definitely are, but those are, for someone who's looking to hit the ground running, to start using this, I've got those 25 in there. And that's it's a great way to do it. It's like, all right, if you're launching a new product, or you've started a new company, or you're moving your company, you're expanding your company into a geographic area where you're not well known. Like in all of those cases, the buying barrier might be, I don't know if I should trust these people. I don't really know who they are. So then, you might want to say, well, all right, we're going to test some social proof, and we're going to use testimonials, or we're going to talk about the number of years we've been in business, or the number of customers we've serviced, or we're going to talk about this being our most popular product, or we're going to talk about the fast growth that a particular product of ours is experiencing. All of those are indications of social proof. Or we might say, no, we're going to test the authority principle, because ever since people were young, they've been taught to recognize and respect authority. So by the time an authority says so. When an authority tells them something, they believe it. And if an authority asks them to do something, they generally do it. So maybe you're a brand new company, people don't know you, but you've been endorsed by the Better Business Bureau. You've been endorsed by the American Dental Association. You have some kind of an expert who's speaking for you. So, we want to emphasize that, because then people go, okay, now I feel, it's safe. Like I feel safe to buy this because the ADA said it's good, or I feel safe to buy this because other people like me have already bought it and they've been happy. So therefore, I feel like it's going to be a good move for me. So it's basically looking at what the company wants to do, why people may not want to do what the company wants them to do, and then what are the best behavioral science principles that we can bring to bear to overcome that objection.
So that one is also interesting. Why don't the people do what you want them to do? How do you find out? Because if you ask people, they lie without knowing it. What's your trick?
You're absolutely right about that, Alex. If you do ask people, they don't mean to lie. They'll tell you, what they think the answer is, but very often why they do things is not really why, it isn't something that they're aware of. There are factors at play. So, there are a few different ways to go at it. There are ways to do research with researchers who are skilled in behavioral science, who have a way of eliciting your real response, not necessarily what you're saying, but what you're really responding to. So there are certain behavioral science infused research firms that can get at that. Another thing we like to do is we like to talk to customer service people. We like to talk to salespeople. And what we ask are, what are the questions you hear? Why do people call to complain? If people want to cancel their order or they want to return the product, why is that? If people buy and then they're confused and they call because they need help, where do they need help? So some of it is just, checking in with the people on the front lines, whether they're the salespeople or the customer service people, to hear, well, what are people saying? Salespeople, it's like, all right, I can't seem to make a sale because, people say, I don't know who you guys are. Well, all right, that's helpful information. So it's not always, you're absolutely right, Alex. It's not always easy to figure it out. But what we do is we take our best guess. If we know that we're brand new in the market, if we know that we're considerably higher price than our competition, if we know that we have a very niche market and there's an established competitor that's already playing there, you can start to take a pretty good guess at what some of the buying barriers might be.
So it's always about testing. So the book is more like, let's say, a sales Bible or behavioral science Bible, right? So you can leave it next to your desk and you can read it and use it. So you don't have to read it over and over again.
I think you're absolutely right. It is all about testing. What works for one company or one campaign may not work for the next. What didn't work in the past may work in the future. So it really is about testing. But what it's about is helping you to test better, to have a better educated guess, to give you ideas to test that maybe you hadn't thought of before, to see where other people have succeeded. So you can say, all right, I can try to apply that here. So it's like a sales Bible or a hands-on handbook, very practical, very actionable, very tactical, so that you're armed with an advantage when you go out there. All marketers should be testing, but this is going to give you a better shot of getting good results. It's going to increase the likelihood that you're going to get the response you're looking for.
So the book is titled Using Behavioral Science in Marketing, and it's you can buy it anywhere. But you're also the owner of HBT Marketing.
So HBT Marketing, HBT stands for Human Behavior Triggers, because we're all about putting human behavior triggers into marketing best practices in order to increase engagement and response for our clients. We increase the likelihood they get the response they're looking for. So HBT, Human Behavior Triggers.
Yeah, but that's not all. There's also the M, the K, the T, and the G.
M, the K, we shorten, HBTMKTG.com.
Yeah.
Yes, we shorten the word marketing, so it's a little bit more concise and fewer keystrokes. Yes, HBTMKTG.com.
I'm ashamed of myself because I didn't see it. It was marketing in the end, but I thought, what are these letters? I'll put the link in the URL, of course, for everybody to learn. So I hope you'll come and speak in the Netherlands. I'm going to do my best to get you here. Maybe there's an offer you can't refuse. So I'd like to thank you a lot for this interview. You have a lot of information and it's a pleasure to listen to you and a lot of new insights. So that's great.
Well, Alex, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to be on your show. Would love to see you in person in the Netherlands. That would be wonderful. But thank you so much. This has been a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed it.